In the last episode, we witnessed Dorothea receiving a letter from her father, the formidable Sir Giles Raffal, summoning her to Pervaz. Without a moment's hesitation, Dorothea swiftly sets out for Pervaz, knowing full well the weight of her father's request. Sir Giles Raffal, often hailed as the genius of the century, held the highest authority at the academy, shaping generations with his unparalleled intellect. Thanks to his influence, Dorothea began her studies at an exceptionally early age. Yet, with every word she spoke, if her voice rose even slightly, Raffal would sternly reprimand her, insisting it was unbecoming of a lady to raise her voice. Each time, Dorothea felt stifled, as if her very essence was being rejected, but she dared not challenge her father's rigid ideals. His frequent quotes from renowned scholars often came with sharp criticisms, reinforcing his view of her as foolish and inadequate. Upon her arrival at the Grand Pervaz castle, Raffal wastes no time in introducing her to Carain. He explains that Dorothea has been summoned to assist him, her presence more of a tool in his grander schemes. Dorothea, overwhelmed but composed, greets Carain with the utmost formality. Carain, observing her with interest, remarks that it has indeed been quite some time since their last meeting, and for the exacting Lord Raffal to summon her personally, he is eager to see the breadth of knowledge and skill she brings. Dorothea, modest yet resigned, responds that her father claimed he had much work to attend to, and she was there merely to handle minor tasks. Raffal, ever critical, comments that she is a little better than the others he has mentored at the academy, which is why he called upon her. As Carain processes this, a thought crosses his mind. He had long heard of Professor Raffal's boundless ambition, but never would he have guessed that Raffal would so quickly bring Dorothea to Pervaz right after Cecilia's arrival. Carain, noticing Dorothea's fatigue, kindly tells her to take a well-deserved rest, acknowledging how exhausting it must have been to journey to such a harsh and rugged place like Pervaz. However, before she can retreat, Raffal steps in, halting her. With his usual authoritative tone, he informs her that Countess Ashia Pervaz is expected to greet her soon. A twinge of nervousness creeps in, but Dorothea steels herself, determined to show no sign of fear or unease. Moments later, Ashia strides into the room, and to Dorothea's astonishment, the Countess is nothing like she imagined. Instead of a hardened, intimidating warrior, Ashia is a confident and strikingly beautiful young woman. Taken aback by her unexpected presence, Dorothea quickly gathers herself and greets Ashia with the utmost politeness, addressing her as Your Highness. The words catch Ashia off guard. This is the first time someone has addressed her with such reverence. Raffal swiftly interjects, proudly introducing Dorothea as his daughter, emphasizing that he has kept her close at his side and called her to Pervaz to assist with minor tasks. As Ashia listens, her mind churns with questions. Is Dorothea's arrival part of a larger trend? Are more noble women being drawn to Pervaz, and if so, what does this mean for the future? She voices her concern for Dorothea's well-being, warning her that Pervaz is far from safe and advising her to remain within the castle walls as much as possible. Ashia also suggests that Dorothea should always have an escort when venturing out. Dorothea, grateful for Ashia's thoughtful consideration, expresses her thanks. Turning the conversation, Carain casually asks Ashia if she will be joining them for dinner. To his surprise, Ashia agrees, stating she will indeed join the meal. Yet, as Carain observes her, a quiet sadness settles over him. He realizes that Ashia shows little interest in their female guests, her thoughts seemingly elsewhere, detached from the social currents swirling around them. After their conversation with Ashia and Carain, Dorothea and Raffal made their way through the grand lobby of Pervaz Castle. As they walked, Raffal suddenly commanded Dorothea in a cold, unwavering tone, "From now on, you are to address Ashia as Countess Pervaz, not Her Highness." Dorothea, caught off guard by his harsh words, hesitated for a moment before timidly trying to explain, "I only thought that since she's married to His Highness, even if it's a contract marriage." But before she could finish, Raffal sharply cut her off. "There is power in what you say. If you keep calling her Her Highness, even His Highness Carain may start recognizing that woman as his true wife. You need to be careful with your words, Dorothea." His tone grew colder, more calculating, as he continued, "Your goal here is to make an impression on His Highness. Don't forget that. You must prove yourself indispensable during your time in Pervaz." With those final, biting words, Raffal turned and walked away, leaving Dorothea standing alone in the vast corridor. His cold dismissal weighed heavily on her, and she couldn't help but feel a deep sadness settle in her chest. The following day, Ashia made a key decision for Pervaz Castle, appointing a new butler named Samuel. With a confident air, she entrusted him with the responsibility of overseeing the castle's daily operations, requesting him to take great care in maintaining the estate from now on. After giving Samuel his charge, Ashia called on Della, asking her to show Samuel around the castle and help him understand the intricacies of its management. Once Samuel and Della departed, Ashia turned to Decker and remarked on the coolness of the air, suggesting they take a stroll around the castle grounds. As they wandered, Decker, ever thoughtful, asked Ashia if she believed that Pervaz was improving. Without hesitation, Ashia responded, "Of course I think so." She then paused, turning to Decker with gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you for convincing Samuel to take the position," she said earnestly. Decker, ever humble, shook his head. "There's no need to thank me. It was Samuel's decision entirely. I merely introduced him to the opportunity." They eventually sat down on a bench, the serene weather and gentle breeze setting a peaceful atmosphere around them. For a moment, they simply enjoyed the stillness, appreciating the beauty of their surroundings. After a while, Decker broke the silence, informing Ashia of more good news. "The first harvest will begin very soon," he said. "We'll be able to stock up on emergency supplies for the winter." Ashia nodded, a sense of relief washing over her. The future of Pervaz, though still uncertain, was starting to take shape in a promising direction. Noticing Ashia's pleasant mood, Decker hesitated for a moment before asking a question that had clearly been on his mind. "Why have 2 new women recently arrived at the castle?" Ashia smiled, her expression calm yet knowing. "They both claim they've come to help His Highness Carain, but to me, it seems like they're competing for the position of crown princess." Decker's eyes widened in shock. "Are they Carlin's lovers, then?" Ashia's response was measured, without a hint of surprise. "Something like that, I guess." Seeing Decker's bewildered expression, Ashia reminded him with a slight smirk, "You did say that you don't care what Carain does in the castle. Pervaz has made it this far because of our contract, so you should honor your word." Her tone was light, but there was a deeper truth to her words. She then added, "It's no secret that Carain is fond of women. I had a feeling sooner or later he'd invite one, if not more, to the castle." Decker, clearly concerned for Ashia's well-being, leaned in a little closer. "You should also think about finding your happiness. What do you plan to do after you divorce His Highness?" Ashia burst into laughter at Decker's sudden advice. "You don't need to worry about me," she teased. "Especially when you, at 26 years old, have never even held a woman's hand." Decker's face turned bright red with embarrassment. "I can if I put my mind to it," he muttered defensively, causing Ashia to chuckle even more. Their light-hearted banter continued as they resumed their stroll through the castle grounds, the atmosphere between them relaxed and full of camaraderie. However, what they didn't realize was that Carain had been hiding behind a nearby shed, eavesdropping on their entire conversation. Hearing Ashia so casually speak about his fondness for women and dismiss the situation with such ease made Carain feel a deep sense of ridicule. It stung to know that Ashia thought of him in such a manner, as if his actions were predictable and without consequence. Carain found himself standing behind the shed, gripped by an unfamiliar sense of sadness. He couldn't understand why it bothered him so much. After all, Ashia had known him as a libertine from the beginning, and he had carefully crafted that image. There was nothing unfair about her seeing him that way, it was exactly what he wanted. Yet, despite that, he felt uneasy. "Do I really find it unpleasant that she spoke as if she knew everything about me?" Carain pondered, confused by his own emotions. But then he reasoned, isn't it natural? She only knows what little she's seen or heard, still, the thought lingered, nagging at him. He felt foolish for having followed Ashia and Decker, knowing Bailey would laugh at him if he ever found out about this odd behavior. But no matter how much Carain tried to rationalize it, he couldn't shake off the image of Ashia and Decker together, laughing and chatting with such ease. The idea gnawed at him, leaving him feeling restless and unsettled. Meanwhile, in the capital, tensions were brewing. Matthias, Carlin's younger brother, voiced his concerns to their mother. "We need to bring Carain back to the capital," he said, his tone serious. "We never know when he might be needed to eliminate monsters." The situation had grown more urgent with the recent appearance of Soma wyverns in the southern part of the empire. The Imperial Knights had initially tried to involve Matthias in the campaign against the creatures, but the plan had been cancelled at the last minute due to flimsy excuses and strong opposition from several factions. Beatrice watched her son pacing in frustration, trying to calm Matthias with gentle words, but he was beyond reason. "You can't expect me to calm down, mother," Matthias shouted, his voice filled with anger and fear. "You're so relaxed because all you do is sit in the Imperial Palace. You don't have to face the threat of monsters or the risk of death." Matthias continued, his voice trembling with desperation, "If I die, you won't be safe either. You have to do something." Beatrice, her face still and controlled, took a deep breath and signaled discreetly to her maid. The maid quickly understood, hurrying to pour a strange powder into a glass of wine. Beatrice then turned to her son, her voice soothing and soft. "Matthias, my heart, drink this wine. It will help calm your nerves." Matthias, still fuming but trusting his mother, reluctantly took the glass and drank the wine. As he finished the last sip, "You are my heart, Matthias," she whispered, her voice full of tenderness. I will do whatever it takes to keep you from being dragged into battle. Hearing her words gave Matthias a fleeting sense of comfort. But as soon as he began to relax, a sudden wave of dizziness overcame him. His vision blurred, and before he knew it, his body grew heavy. He staggered, his eyelids fluttering, and moments later, he collapsed into a deep sleep. With Matthias now unconscious, Beatrice's gentle expression hardened. She turned sharply to her maid, her voice firm. Send a message to Gabriel immediately. Tell him I wish to speak with him. A short while later, Beatrice and Gabriel met in the dimly lit chapel, their hushed conversation echoing off the stone walls. Gabriel greeted her with a polite nod, his voice soft. Your Majesty, how have you been? Beatrice, her expression stern, replied, I've been helping Matthias. He's struggling, and rightly so. His Majesty, the Emperor, is far too kind, entrusting military authority to a child with no experience. Gabriel sighed, nodding in agreement. I understand. His Highness Matthias has hardly ever received proper knight training. He was born under the star of Asphodylus, the god of beauty and love, after all. Annoyance flickered in Beatrice's eyes. And that is precisely why we need to bring Carain back from Pervaz. He has abandoned his duties and chosen to hide in that backwater land. Her voice hardened as she leaned in. Do you have any idea how we can drag him out of there? Gabriel thought for a moment, then offered a solution, his tone measured. What about an annulment of marriage? Beatrice raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. Annulment? Is that even possible? Gabriel, with quiet confidence, replied, We'll make it possible. The temple has a few grounds on which they can declare a marriage annulled. One is when one party deceives the other into marriage. There's also if the couple has seriously neglected their duty to produce heirs. A gleam of satisfaction appeared in Beatrice's eyes as she processed Gabriel's words. That's brilliant. She smiled, a rare expression of cheerfulness. I will contact the spy we planted in Pervaz immediately and gather whatever information we need. On a cool October night in Pervaz, the atmosphere inside the castle was alive with warmth and light as everyone gathered for the welcome dinner in honor of Cecilia and Dorothea. Ashia, stepping into the dining hall, was taken aback by how beautiful the castle looked after its recent renovations. The grand space gleamed under soft candlelight, its newly refurbished walls and floors transforming the once rugged fortress into something more refined and regal. Carain, seated at the head of the table, stood to address the guests. Now that everyone is here, let's begin the dinner. His voice carried easily through the hall, and the maids immediately began serving the first course. As plates were set before them, Ashia and Decker exchanged curious looks, both eyeing the unfamiliar meat in front of them. Decker leaned toward Ashia, quietly asking, What kind of meat is this? Before Ashia could respond, Cecilia chimed in, her voice carrying a hint of pride. It's turkey. If you cook it incorrectly, it becomes tasteless and tough, so you can all look forward to the skill of the chef His Highness Carain brought with him. Dorothea added her own observation, leaning forward slightly. I don't think there are any bones in the turkey, which means they've separated the legs and wings before serving. Ashia, intrigued by the conversation, decided to add her thoughts. It's not difficult to prepare properly if you know the skeletal structure of the bird. Carain, who had been listening quietly until now, suddenly let out a hearty laugh. I've met a lot of people, but it's funny to hear you talk about turkey like that, Ashia. As the dinner progressed, Carain finally announced, Let's start, signaling the formal beginning of the meal. The chatter around the table gradually picked up, and soon Bailey, with his usual casual air, How have you been, Lady Derpit? Lady Derpit, poised and composed, responded, I'm fine, thank you for asking. She then shifted her attention to Dorothea, her tone curious. Miss Dorothea, why are you here? Have you come to see Sir Raffal on behalf of your family? Dorothea, maintaining her usual polite demeanor, answered, My father is busy, so I came to help him with some tasks. Cecilia, with a sly smile, leaned in. Oh, I see. Does that mean you'll be seeing all of Sir Raffal's top-secret documents? Dorothea replied with modesty, I'm only here to help with small errands, nothing of that sort. Before the conversation could go any further, Raffal interjected with a sharp tone, When it comes to top-secret information, I'd be more concerned about Cecilia. Cecilia's expression didn't waver. With confidence, she responded, The Dupret family has sworn complete loyalty to His Highness Carain. The fact that I've come all this way is proof of that. Raffal, unimpressed, retorted, Perhaps it's just a throwaway card for you. Decker, observing the escalating tension between Cecilia and Raffal, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Cecilia, not backing down, shot back, You should be careful, Sir Raffal. I have considerable influence in social circles, and that holds great value. Raffal smirked. Oh, yes, I've definitely heard about your popularity, especially with men. The tension around the table became palpable, with some guests growing visibly uneasy at the increasingly biting exchange. Decker, feeling particularly worried, turned his gaze toward Ashia, wondering how she was reacting to the thinly veiled insults being traded. To his surprise, Ashia seemed entirely unbothered. She hadn't been paying any attention to the snide comments or the tense atmosphere. Instead, she was calmly enjoying her dinner, focused solely on the food in front of her. As Ashia watched Dorothea and Cecilia engage in conversation, she noted that while they were speaking highly of themselves, the atmosphere around the table was far from pleasant. The tension in the air was palpable, with sharp words exchanged and barbed comments that seemed to create an uncomfortable chasm between the guests. Cecilia, catching Ashia's gaze, quickly offered an apology. "I'm sorry if our conversation about my father seemed inappropriate in front of Count Pervaz. That wasn't my intention." Ashia, maintaining her calm demeanor, replied with a reassuring smile. "It's all right. I actually enjoy talking about my father too." Intrigued, Cecilia leaned in. "I've heard your father was a remarkable man. What happened to him?" Ashia's eyes softened as she began to recount her father's story. "It is said that he led our forces to victory by personally killing the enemy general. For his valor and military service, he was rewarded with the title of Margrave of Pervaz." Cecilia observed Ashia's serene composure and couldn't help but think that Ashia must be exceptionally skilled at masking her true emotions. Curious about the practices surrounding military honors, Cecilia asked, "In wars where the imperial family is involved, isn't it common to bestow titles on outstanding soldiers?" Ashia, unfamiliar with this detail, turned to Carain for clarification. "Is it true that you accumulated all your achievements in this manner?" Carain, clearly irritated, shot back, "So you think I should pick up someone else's accolades and make a meal of them? Don't lump my father's achievements in with mine. We're not the same." Ashia, taken aback by his sharp response but not deterred, simply nodded in acknowledgement and resumed eating. As Carain observed the dinner scene, he couldn't help but wonder about Ashia's demeanor. While everyone was clearly entangled in the underlying power struggle, particularly the silent battle between Cecilia and Dorothea for the position of crown princess, even Decker seemed to be acutely aware of the tension. Yet, Ashia appeared completely detached from the unfolding drama. Her lack of interest in the subtle power plays and rivalries struck Carain as peculiar. He pondered over her nonchalant attitude. On one hand, it was refreshing to see someone not clinging to him, but on the other, shouldn't they be putting on a show of marital unity for the benefit of outsiders? Turning his attention back to Ashia, Carain broached a different topic. "Do you remember the couple's portrait we discussed earlier?" Ashia nodded, acknowledging her recollection. Cecilia, her curiosity piqued, inquired, "What portrait are you referring to?" Carain explained, "As a member of the royal family who is married, I need to have a portrait made for the imperial archives and also hang one here in the castle. It's a formality for royal couples." Cecilia's expression visibly darkened at this news, her disappointment apparent. Carain then directed his gaze to Bailey. "Bailey, how did you choose the painter for this portrait?" Bailey responded promptly, "Among the painters I contacted, Fabian Rusket accepted the commission. He should be arriving soon." Dorothea, recognizing the name Fabian Rusket, spoke up with evident admiration. "Isn't he the artist who has won the grand prize 3 times at the Imperial Salon?" Ashia's reaction was less than enthusiastic, her expression showing a hint of discomfort. Noticing this, Dorothea asked with genuine curiosity, "Is there another artist you prefer, Your Highness?" Ashia shook her head. "It's not that I'm unhappy. It's just that sitting for hours in elaborate jewelry and a dress isn't really to my taste. It's quite a hassle." Carain responded with a hint of authority, "As a member of the imperial family, it's our duty to participate in these traditions." At that moment, a servant approached Sir Raffal with a message from the capital. Raffal read the letter and his face went pale with shock. The message stated that it seemed Raffal had proposed the annulment of the marriage as a means to remove Carain from Pervaz. It claimed that both His Majesty Carain and Count Pervaz had been negligent in their marital duties, leading to the marriage being declared null and void. Raffal, his voice laced with concern, relayed the message to Carain. "If this is true, we'll need to prove that you and Ashia are indeed a legitimate couple. But the question remains, who would recognize such a strained pair as a genuine couple?"